Welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. I'm Richard Fields. On the program today we have Erik Smitt, spokesman for Don't Double the Tax, No on Measure B, Debra Desrosiers, vice chair for Don't Double the Tax, No on Measure B, and a retired financial planner, namely Robert Page. Welcome to the show. We'll talk about Don't Double the Tax, No on Measure B next week, but this week we're going to talk about clowns.
No.
There is a march going on in Tucson that is entitled Clown Lives Matter. Do they?
No.
No.
Do you like clowns?
I love clowns.
I like them at Barnum and Bailey's circus.
And
They're
I like
entertaining.
them. I like them at the rodeo, and I like them at kids' birthday parties.
Okay, but not coming out of the forest and
Out of the
trying
forest?
to lure people into the forest.
What?
In the neighborhoods. Or my son came home from school 2 days ago and said that on Instagram there were...
On Instagram, okay.
On
That's
Instagram...
got a lot of credibility there, but go on.
I know, right? But that's what the kids look at. And while he was at school, there was a threat on his school. Actually, there were several schools in Sacramento County that were threatened that a clown was coming to the school at 3:30 to cause them harm, which he said was possibly a shooting, but he wasn't worried about it at all. I asked him if he even told his teachers about this Instagram, and all the kids were talking about it, but he had no idea if the teachers knew about it.
So this sounds like a prank, if nothing.
He took it as a prank, so.
Okay. Well, I mean, there have been news stories about alleged bad clown sightings, clowns doing bad things. But as far as I know, almost all of those allegations have turned out to be false allegations, just rumors, just pranks, and just people having fun with the whole idea of clowns being evil.
It's not fun.
Not funny.
It's not funny.
So you're not going to the Clown Lives Matter March in Tucson then?
No.
Okay.
I won't be there.
I have relatives in Tucson. I'll see if they'll go and send us video.
Send us video and see if they do any clown tricks.
Okay.
Good, bad, or otherwise. We want to know. Okay. Clown Lives Matter. The other thing that matters, one thing that matters to me, because I have kids in the millennial age group, okay? My kids don't live at home, and I'm eternally grateful for that. But I'm trying to read my writing here. 67% of 15 to 29-year-olds in the United States live with their parents. That's 67%, 2/3, compared to 63% back in 2007, just prior to the Obama administration, which has really improved the economy. But wait, huh? What?
I have two of them.
Living at home?
Yeah.
Okay. What's that all about? Why is it that millennials are having such a hard time moving out of the house, getting an apartment, getting a job, etc.?
Personally, my daughter's 24.
Okay.
And she has a college degree.
Yeah.
She's has a degree in social work. She needs to go back and get her master's.
Right.
But right now the pay level is so low that she can't afford the rent to rent her own space.
Okay.
So that's
in a professional job.
In a professional job, yes.
Okay.
That to me is a typical sign of what's going on in the economy. In fact, I just heard something today that the Fed has now decided to embark on a program of buying stock. So it has the appearance that our companies are going up in value because the Fed is borrowing money or printing money to go out and buy stocks. Makes the country look like it's doing well. It increases the pension plans are in serious trouble with what's happening with the economy. It's all based off of the economy. There are just not the jobs around. I mean, I know people that have 2 or 3 jobs, because they can't get a good one.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, I'm with you. My son's left home, and they're doing fine. My wife seems to want them back, but they don't want to come back.
Wives are like that.
Live with dad anymore. So it's all good, and this is part of our culture in America and part of how we grew up and such. But I do find that the economy today, the static economy, as I would call it, is not producing the growth or opportunity for anyone. And when you look at young people, you know, back in my generation, if you didn't have a job, you were just lazy. Well, I think that there are assorted issues there, but there isn't the growth opportunity. My sons had jobs when they were like 14 years old, bussing dishes at the local
Well, a lot of that's got to do with today. It's illegal. I mean, you look back at the jobs that we had as kids, and most of them are illegal to do today.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm.
You've got to go out and ask government permission to do anything. I mean, friends and I were talking the other month ago about what is it that we are free to do in this country without asking government permission first.
In the form of licensing or...
In the form of almost anything.
Yeah.
And then they're going to make money illegal.
It used to be my goal to have a job that wasn't government controlled, and now I've recognized there aren't any anymore.
No.
Well, I grew up on a farm where the jobs that I did, working with power takeoffs, working with you know, dangerous large machinery, silage blowers that had huge fans in them that would chop your head off if you got your arm too close to it. Those are the kinds of jobs that even adults aren't allowed to do anymore because of OSHA standards. You know, so you know, we've made illegal a lot of the jobs that that kids could do in my generation. And we've got minimum wage laws, which price out most of the entry-level jobs that would take up a whole lot of the slack.
Particularly when you factor in the other benefits that are required to go along for an employer to provide for an employee. When we were kids, we'd go out and get a job. The employer paid us for doing a job. You go out and get a job now, the employer is responsible for you and your family.
And health insurance,
care to go along with
unemployment insurance, and
retirement benefits.
And there's a third issue, and that's the three-letter agencies at both the state, federal, and to a certain extent the local level, which make it really, really difficult to use your land. I'm talking about EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers. Make it really, really difficult to get to go into a business where others in the business would prefer not to have competition. I'm talking about moving vans, taxi cabs prior to Uber,
Yes.
That sort of thing.
Limitations on businesses are everywhere.
Competitive restrictions.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, in America, the biggest fans of regulation are big corporations.
Absolutely.
So that they can prevent others from entering and competing and providing a better service at a lower cost. Massachusetts passed a law that every Uber ride has to pay 5 cents to a pool of money that's given to the taxi cab companies.
Oh,
What?
Isn't that nice?
Isn't that?
The largest proponent of food stamps is J.P. Morgan Chase because their credit card is the one that's used and they get a percentage of each transaction.
Well, and that's also a dirty deal between the agricultural lobby and
Yes.
and the welfare lobby. Farmers make out, and so do welfare workers. And if you take a look at the whole welfare expenditure, 80% of the welfare is spent on administration, and 20% actually gets down to the welfare recipients, whether whatever the.
I thought it was only 75%.
Well, here's just a rose-colored glasses optimist, Robert. Proposition 53 is on the ballot in California. It's a statewide ballot measure which would require voter approval of any revenue bond measure over $2 billion. It's funded by Stockton farmer agriculturalist Dino Cortopassi. It would interestingly subject the high-speed rail and the twin tunnels to a popular vote. Governor Brown doesn't like it very much. What about you?
I love it. So, you know, we're supposed to be a government of the people, and we shouldn't have politicians picking their pet projects and funding them with our money. So I think the closest example that comes home here is the arena. Did any of you get to vote on whether or not the arena went in here? No. It opened last night, a couple nights ago, with Paul McCartney, and I'm sure the box seats at the City of Sacramento box were full of politicians. I never saw a photo of it. Maybe photos weren't allowed that night. So we need to take back control of expenditures and stop some things like the high-speed train, which I used to be a big fan of and seems to be burdened by horrible bureaucracy and ineptitude. And this will be a step in that right direction.
You were a fan of the bullet train?
I was. I'm a fan of transportation. I'm an engineer.
Okay.
You know, we used to drive choo-choo trains.
Yep.
And so, you know, I'm...
Oh, you're a railroad engineer.
No, actually, I'm a mechanical. But my sister always calls me a railroad engineer.
Okay.
But I'm a fan of blossoming technology and mass transit and such. And there's smart transportation, and then there's dumb transportation. I've ridden high-speed rail in Japan and in Europe. I don't know what it costs there. It was beautiful. So the real question is can it be done reasonably with proper return on investment?
Which is, I'm going to guess, in the case of the high-speed rail, the bullet train, probably not ever going to happen in 75 lifetimes.
You know, why don't they take that money and put it towards the roads?
Oh, you mean make Highway 99 and Highway 5 not quite as congested?
Well, no, like divvy it out to the different counties in Sacramento County and that, and make road improvements.
Okay, makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Moving on to Proposition 54. It's a statewide ballot measure which would require, number one, all state bills would need to be printed and available on the internet 72 hours.
Would that need to be in 29 different languages?
That I'm not sure about, Robert, but printed and available on the internet 72 hours before they could be voted on. Number two, all public legislative meetings would have to be videotaped and the tapes made available to the public within 24 hours of the meeting occurring. And then number three, citizens, you and I, could go and record any public meeting, and including the politicians taking a nap after lunch at afternoon public meetings.
You could videotape them,
playing
tweeting
solitaire.
and playing solitaire. I think that's a great idea.
Well, certainly we need accountability there.
Yeah. I think we should be able to see what they're doing. Have a camera behind them so you can
To see what websites they're going to?
Yeah, to
Yes,
see what they're
yes.
doing when you're up there giving your presentation and they're looking all over the place or talking to their partner.
Sounds like you've been in that situation where you've been able to testify before a committee that wasn't paying a whole heck of a lot of attention to what you were saying.
Yes, I have. Yes, I went on a Proposition 13 meeting down in San Francisco, and while we were at the meeting, slowly the people on the board were leaving. And so there was 3 people left when it was my turn to speak. I said, I thank them. Thanks for staying and listening to what I have to say. But this giving us 72 hours notice to read the bills, I hope the politicians would read the bills too.
That would be my point, that I would hope the politicians would read the bills, because I'm certain that the electoral people will not pay attention to this. They don't care about it. I mean, that's the problem. If elections mattered, the politicians wouldn't let us do them.
Yeah. What the big issue is with the timing and public exposure is a lot of things get snuck in the middle of the night.
On the last day.
On the last day.
Yeah.
And they stop time. Isn't that amazing? You know?
Yeah.
They unplug the clock.
My
so
wife
it
has
doesn't
been trying
expire.
to figure out how to make that happen.
Yes.
And
So those little paragraphs get in there, and those little paragraphs always seem to benefit some special interest.
at a huge cost to
And
everybody
when
else.
the clock is no longer running and it's only there visible for a few nanoseconds before they vote on it, there is no opportunity for those concerned people in the public to respond and say, no, too much.
So 72
Stop.
hours is probably not quite enough time, but at least it's something.
Yeah.
Okay. And as far as the citizens recording public meetings, is that sort of like, citizens have the right to record police, citizens have the right to record politicians?
I believe so. It's a public event.
It would
Recording.
seem like you should be able
Yes.
to.
I think they should, yeah.
Again, whether or not anybody would watch it, but I think that just the fact that they were being taped or videotaped would make them act a little more accountable to themselves and hold their conscience.
There's a little bit of...
I wouldn't want anybody to know that I said that.
There's a little bit of anecdotal, at least, and probably statistical evidence that when police wear body cams that record everything that they're doing and all of their interactions with the public, they interact with the public in a lot more respectful way than when they aren't wearing body cams, because you can compare what's done by the body cams with what's done by iPhones, by spectators, by passers-by.
Yeah.
So
it's the same thing I always used in business. I'd always tell people to act like they were talking to their grandmother, and if they act that way, things will go better.
There was a vice presidential debate earlier this week. It was Tim Kaine, I think his name is, versus what was the other guy's? Mike Pence. Mike Pence. I'm sorry. Bill Weld was not there. Was not invited because they're only at 9 or 10% in the polls when they are required to be at 15%. Really interesting because those polls conveniently have a very, very small sampling of two demographic groups, really three demographic groups, in which Bill Weld and Gary Johnson are doing very well. They're missing the millennials, they're missing the independents, and they're missing the military. Those are areas where the Johnson campaign is probably 20–30%. In some cases, higher than one or the other, Trump or Clinton. Those demographic groups mysteriously missing from the four polls that were used to put them down to 9 or 10%, but that's another story. The question is, did we learn anything from the vice presidential debate? Was it all heat or was there some light?
So I didn't watch, and I didn't watch on purpose.
Nor did I.
Because
so should we be talking about it?
I want a president and vice president who's deliberative and constructs sound policy. And debates, to me, tend to be sound bites. I get enough commercials through all the rest of the media all the time from all parties. I don't want to watch one in person.
What I saw or listened to on the radio, which was not extensive, but it seemed as though they were both baiting each other into who would be able to go to war first with somebody. And it didn't even seem like they cared with who.
With who?
You got North Korea, you got China with their buildup, you got the bare Russians. And Aleppo. They just wanted to go to war. For our own good, everybody in the world must fear the United States. Respect no longer has any place in their lexicon. It's all based off of fear. You watched the whole thing?
You watched the whole thing, so you're the only expert.
What did I miss?
Well, I watched it, and I was really irritated with Kaine interrupting all the time. I tweeted out that he was like a chihuahua that wouldn't stop biting your ankles. And I talked to my mom after the debate, and she's in her 70s, and she couldn't believe the way he was acting either. He just really put on quite a show, and it wasn't good, I didn't think.
I mean, I watched clips. I didn't watch I only have so much intestinal fortitude and courage and all of the other prerequisites necessary to actually suffer through.
I like the torture.
The torture of watching the debate. So I only watch clips. That's all I can take. A couple, maybe 20, 30 seconds at a time. And what you're saying was what got played on the clips. So that's what was.
It was constant through the whole debate.
Constant interruption.
It did not stop, and they would not stop for the moderator, especially Kaine wouldn't stop for the moderator, trying to, gentlemen.
Did anybody make a substantive point on policy that anybody could take away and say, yeah, I think I'll vote for them?
No, I don't think so.
So they were both basically talking about the bad points of the opposition. Nothing good about what they were going to do or not do.
Well, if anyone talked about policy, it was Pence. Kaine was just trying to bring up the same issues against Trump over and over repeating the same issues over and over.
It sounds like it was just as embarrassing to watch as the presidential debate, and people around the world look at us with 350 million people in our country, and those are the 2 and 4 best people that we can come up with to represent our country. It's just embarrassing.
It's very disappointing.
Terrifying what the future is going to bring.
Getting to the Johnson Weld campaign, Gary Johnson is polling at about 8% nationally. He's polling at about 24% in selected states: New Mexico, his home state; Utah, doing fairly well; in Colorado. In fact, he's polling at a high enough level so he's actually, if he concentrates his resources in those states, which I think they're planning on doing, he could actually win 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4 states. New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, maybe a couple of others, mostly small states population-wise, mostly in the West. If that happened, and if the election continues to be as close as it appears to be right now between Trump and Clinton, it's entirely possible that he could deny an electoral college win to either Clinton or Trump. It takes 270 votes to win outright. If you don't get 270 votes, neither one of them get 270 votes, the election goes into the House of Representatives.
Yes.
Once the election goes into the House, interesting things happen, because once it's in the House, the states each caucus and decide who they're going to vote for. So California would caucus, there are 50-some representatives would have a vote and say, who are we going to vote for? Probably be Clinton in the state of California. In Texas, it would probably be Trump. Whatever, each state would vote. Well, if you take a look at the state the state delegations, there's, I think, 36 or something like that right now that are Republican delegations. So you know that Clinton's not going to get a majority of the delegations. You also know that there's going to be a lot of states that are not going to vote for Trump because they just, there's a lot of Republicans who don't want Trump. There's an outside possibility that a compromise could be reached where the Democrats would vote for Johnson on the second or third ballot, probably. Democrats would vote for Johnson and tear off enough Republicans to deny Trump the victory.
I think
and elect him president.
That's a pipe dream.
You mean I'm wearing the rose-colored glasses for a change?
Are, absolutely, because the people that are in Congress are there to work for the government, to make the government larger and more powerful and more controlling over us, and to have them turn and look to Gary Johnson, who says small government, more freedom. That could not happen.
Well, it's interesting. It certainly would not argue. Okay, would argue also against Trump, because Trump. Who knows what Trump's going to do? He's a wild card.
Yes.
And as a wild card, there's not going to be a whole lot of people, even Republicans, who are going to delegations going to vote for Trump. And I don't see the Republicans voting for Clinton. So I see a possibility, but who knows?
I love those rose-colored glasses.
Well, anyway, we could.
Well, it would certainly be historic.
We could have a lot of. It would make politics interesting for the first time in the last 10, 15 years.
Yes.
Speaking of another political issue, well, this is really foreign policy. It's not about Aleppo, though. Representative Justin Amash has questioned the Obama approval of an arms sale of $1.15 billion to our friends in Saudi Arabia. Thoughts?
Well, certainly we're the biggest arms dealer in the world, and it's hard to tell who our friends are these days, who's going to be shooting them at our enemies and who's going to be shooting them at us. So
that's because we don't even know who our enemies are.
That is true.
Well, we have here's my theory.
And our friends are limited.
My theory is this. We have a phony war on drugs. Nobody cares whether we win it or not. We have a phony war on poverty. It's been going on since the Johnson administration, and it hasn't improved poverty one whit. So that's a phony war. I think we also have a phony war on terrorists. Your chance of being killed by a terrorist in this country are less than the chance of being hit by lightning or being run over.
Eaten by a shark, whether you swim or not.
Yes. Good line. The point is, it's all, the war on terrorism is one more phony war, but it's a really, really expensive phony war because we're arming both sides in Syria. We're arming ISIS, we're arming Al-Qaeda, we're arming Saudi Arabia now, obviously, and they all have a different pony, and they're all basically, it's just tribal warfare is what it is.
And the war machine makers make political contributions for the politicians continue in war, so they make war machines that they can blow up, so they have to make more of
And the
them.
really interesting thing in this electoral season, and the thing that all voters of all political persuasions, progressive, libertarian, conservative, should understand above and beyond all other understanding, is that Hillary Clinton is owned by the war machine, owned by the defense interest, as well as Wall Street. She is owned lock, stock, and barrel. She will do their bidding. She will continue this phony war in the Middle East and elsewhere. And that's just the way it is.
What is that? War is
One
good for business,
uplifting-
invest your son.
Yeah, God. One uplifting story. A school in Baltimore, Robert W. Coleman Elementary, has replaced detention with meditation. It's worked. No suspensions after they started this program.
Nobody
None.
wants to meditate.
And the verbal, no, if you act up, you go to meditation. And people are, they meditate. I guess under, some sort of a guru guidance or something. Verbal GRE scores have increased by 60 points also. Any thoughts on whether or not the Maharishi had the right idea from the beginning?
Well, I'm not sure about the Maharishi, but the programs that we have been using have not worked. For some reason, when I grew up, I was always afraid my father would hit me. He never did, but that fear kept me on the straight and narrow for the most part, for what he heard. And so we do have a problem with discipline and such. I teach first through third graders to read. They are the brightest, most brilliant people I've come across in a long time. Their minds are clear, they're sharp. I don't know what we do to them later on, but sending them away from school and preventing them from being educated is not the solution. Maybe this is.
Thank you very much. That's the show. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place on Libertarian Counterpoint on Channel 17 in Sacramento, YouTube, and on the web at www.accesssacramento.org. 8 p.m. Thursday, noon Friday, and my favorite time, 4 a.m. Saturday morning. That's the show. See you next week.